Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to our group presentation. We are from group 11 and today we will bring you a topic about a power and a politics. Our group is consists of me, Adjie Pangestu, Arya, Raditya, Damarjati, and Kevin Natanael. Next. Okay, first we gonna talk about definition of power. So power is or refer to a capacity that we describe A as someone or a party has to influence the behavior of B, so B can act in accordance with A wishes. Someone can thus have power but not use it. It's a capacity or a potential. We call it a potential power or a capacity of power. Probably the most important aspect of power is that it is a function of dependence. The greater B is dependent on A, the greatest A power in the relationship. Dependent in turn is based on alternative that B perceive and that important B plays on the alternative A controls. A person can have power over you only if he or she controlling something that you desire. Next. And now we will talk about contracting leadership and power. So to become a leader, we must have power. Without power, people would hear you or do things that you want them to do. Leaders use a power as a means of attaining group goals or to achieve a group goals. Power does not require goal compatibility, merely dependence. Leadership, on the other hand, requires some congruence between the goals of the leaders and just being led. A second difference relates to the direction of influence. Leadership focuses on the downward influence on followers. It minimizes the importance of lateral and upward influence pattern. Power does not. It's still another difference. Leadership research for the most part precise style. Next, please. So there are two bases of power. There are formal power and personal power, and this is the explanation of the two of it. The formal powers is based on an individual position in an organization. It can come from the ability to coerce or reward, or from formal authority. This formal power can be divided into three bases: coercive power, reward power, and legitimate power. On the other hand, there are personal power. Personal power is the opposite of a formal power. Formal power comes from the ability to coerce or reward, or from formal authority and based on individual position in an organization. Personal powers come from an individual unique characteristic. We can divide personal power into two bases that expertise and the respect and admiration others. Next. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is a base of formal power. Like we have heard before, formal power we divide into three. There are coercive power, reward power, and the last one is legitimate power. So the coercive powers is based on depends on fear of the negative result from failing to comply. It rests on the application or the threat of application of physical sanctions such as infliction of pain, frustration through restriction of movement, or the controlling by force of basic psychological or safety needs. At the organizational level, has coercive power over B. If A can dismiss, suspend, or demote B, we can say B as someone else and A as someone's. Assuming B values his or her job, if A can assign B work activity B finds unpleasant or treat B in a manner B finds embarrassing, A possesses coercive power over B. Coercive power can also come from withholding key information. People in an organization who have data or acknowledge other needs can make those other depend on them. The second one is reward power. Reward power is the opposite of coercive power, with which people comply because it produces positive benefit. Someone who can distribute reward others view as valuable will have power over them. This reward can be either financial, such as controlling pay rates, raise, and bonuses, or non-financial like recognition, promotion, interesting work assignments, friendly colleagues, and preferred work safe or sales territory. And the third one is legitimate power. In formal group and organization, probably the most common access to one or more of the power base is through legitimate power. It represents the formal authority to control and use organizational resource based on the structural position in the organization. Legitimate power is broader than the power to coerce and reward. Typically, it includes member acceptance of the authority of a position. We associate power so closely with the concept of hierarchy that just drawing longer lines in an organization chart leads people to infer the leaders are especially powerful. And when a powerful executive is described, people tend to put the person at higher position when drawing an organization chart. When school principal, bank president, or army captain speak, assuming their directive as viewed as within the authority of their position, teachers, tellers, and first lieutenant listen and usually comply. Next, please. The next one is a base of personal power. If there are formal power, there are personal power. So we divide into two. There are expert power and referent power. The expert power is influence wielded as a result of expertise, special skill, or knowledge. As jobs become more specialized, we become increasingly depends on expert to achieve a goal. It is generally acknowledged that people can have expertise and hence expert power. Of us follow our doctor advice. Computer specialists like accountants, economists, industrial psychologists, and other specialists with power as a result of their expertise. The second one is referent power. Referent power is based on identification with a person who has desirable resource or personal traits. If I like, respect, and admire you, you can exercise power over me because I want to please you. Referent power develops out of admiration of others and a desire to be like that person. It helps explains, for instance, why celebrities are paid millions of dollars to endorse product in commercial. And the next slide will be presented by my friend. Oh, I'm sorry. I will continue. So, which is based on power are most effective? Research suggests pretty clear that the personal source of power are most effective. Both expert and referent power are positively related to employee satisfaction with supervision, their organizational commitment, and their performance, whereas reward and legitimate power seem to be unrelated to these outcomes. One source of formal power, coercive power, actually can backfire in that it's negatively related to employee satisfaction and commitment. Next, please. Now we will go to dependence, the key to power. Next, please. So we will bring what creates dependence. So the most important aspect of power is that it is a function of dependence. In this section, we show how understanding dependence help us understand power itself. So what creates dependence? Dependence increase when the resource you control is important, scarce, and non-suitable. So we're gonna talk about the first one. The first one is importance. If nobody wants what you have, it's not going to create dependence because organization, for instance, actively seek to avoid uncertainty. We should expect that individual or group that can absorb uncertainty will be perceived as controlling an important resource. A study of industrial organization on their marketing department were consistently the most powerful. The second one is scarcity. Where the supply of something is relatively low from demand, people dependence on it will continue to exist. This is what creates scarcity as one of the forming dependency factor. An example of this, like a sports car that is much sought after dream of, with a limited year supply, make people depend on this. This is also case with power. The greater a person power, the more people depend on him or her. The third one is non-switchability. If I were variable substitute for a resource, the more power control over that resource provided. At university with strong pressure on the faculty to publish, the more recognition that faculty member receive through publication, the more mobile he or she is, because at university one faculty who are highly published and visitable. Although tenure can alter this relationship by restricting the department head autonomy. Faculty member with few or no publication have the least mobility and are subject to the greatest influence from their superior. Next. Next, we will explain by my friend. I'm sorry, Arya, can you open your mic?
Okay, sorry. Okay, so now we will move to the power tactics. So what is power tactics? So the definition of power tactics in ways in which individuals translate power base into specific action. There are plenty of examples of power tactics that are quite common and employed every day. Some of these tactics include bullying, collaboration, complaining, criticizing, demanding, disengaging, evading, inspiring, manipulation, negotiating, socializing, arid, duplication. Okay, so this thing that influence tactics. In this slide, it's review popular tactical option and the condition that may make one more effective than another. Research has identified 9 distinct influence tactics. Okay, the first is legitimacy, relying on your authority position or saying a request support with organizational, police, or rules. The second, rational persuasion, presenting logical argument and factual evidence to demonstrate a request reasonable. The third, inspirational appeal, developing emotional commitment by appealing to the target value, needs, hope, and aspiration. The fourth, consultation, increasing the target support by involving him or her in deciding how we will accomplish your plan. And the 5, exchange, rewarding the target with benefit or favor in exchange for following a request. And 6, personal appeals, asking for compliance based on friendship or loyalty. 7, ingratitude, using flattery, praise, or friendly behavior prior to making a request. 8, pressure, using warning, repeated demands, and threat. And last but not least, coalition, enlisting the aid or support of others to persuade the target to agree. So we move to sexual harassment, unequal power in the workplace. Sexual harassment is divided as any unwanted activity of a sexual nature that affect an individual employment and create a hostile work environment. The U.S. Supreme Court helped to clarify this definition by adding a key test for determining whether sexual harassment has occurred. When comment or behavior in a work environment would reasonably be received and perceived as hostile or abuse. This includes unweighted physical touching require requests for dates when it is made clear the person it is interested and coercive threat that a person will lose his or her job for refusing sexual proposition. And we move to political skill. But the political skill is defined as the ability to influence others in such a way as to enhance one objective. So this is the report of sexual harassment given by country. So for the India, we have 26%, China 80%, Saudi Arabia 90%, Mexico 30%, South Africa 10%, Italy 9%, United States 8%, South Korea, Russia, Brazil same 8%, and Spain, Japan, Canada 6%, Germany 5%, Great Britain and Australia 4%, Sweden and France is 3%. Okay, we move to should all sexual behavior be prohibited at work? So the difficulty in monitoring and defining sexual harassment at work has led some organizations to go beyond discouraging overt sexual harassing behavior. For example, companies ranging from Walmart to Staples to Xerox have disciplined employees for workplace romance and upheld policies that ban hierarchy romantic relationships, such as between a supervisor and subordinate. The idea is that such relationships are so fraught with potential for abuse of power that he cannot possibly consensual for extended period of time. So this is so politic power in action. So for the power in action, the definition of organizational politics is there is no shortage of definition of organizational politics. Essentially, this type of politics focuses on the use of power to affect decision making in organization or on self-serving organizationally unsubstantiated behavior. Political behavior, activity that are not required as a part of a person's formal role in the organization, but that influence or attempt to influence the distribution of advantage and disadvantage within the organization. Okay, now consequence. Okay, now we will move to cause and consequence of political behavior. We will present by my friend.
Okay, thank you for the patience. Now, in this part, we will discuss about cause and consequence of political behavior. Right. The first is individual factors. We will discuss about factors that contributing to political behavior, individual and organizational factors. Individual and organizational factors can increase political behavior and provide favorable outcomes such as rewards and averted punishment. Individual factors, high self-monitors being sensitive to social cues and social conformity, are more skillful in political behavior than low self-monitors. Individuals with internal locus of control, or those who believe they can control their environment, are proactive and manipulative situations in their favor. A person having high expectations of increased future benefits will lose if forced out, hence, is more likely to use illegitimate means or extreme political behavior. More alternative job opportunities a person has, more likely is to use legitimate means, or we can say normal everyday politics. Next, please. Okay, before we talk about individual, now we will discuss about organizational factors that can contribute to political behaviors. The first is resources. Degrees of politics, critically and scarcity of resources in organizations are directly related. Politics surface when the resources are declining and their existing pattern is changing. Infusions of new and infinite resources will lead to high political behavior. The second is trust. Low trust in organizations results in higher political behavior that to a legitimate high. The third is cultural factors. Role ambiguity, or we can say lack of clarity in role definitions, ambiguous decisions, and decisions on which there is a lack of agreement and uncertainty, long-range strategic decisions, zero-sum reward allocations practices, or one man's gain is other man's loss, democratic decision-making, performance evaluation system, and self-seeking senior managers will be sources of conflict and thereby high politics. Higher the pressure on performance employee feel, the greater the likelihood of their resourcing to politics. The fourth is technology and external environment. Complex technology and turbulent external environment lead to high political behavior. The fifth is change. Planned organization change or unplanned change brought about by external environment forces will encourage political behavior. Next, please. Right. Now we gonna discuss how do people respond to organizational politics. An individual who has a clear understanding who is responsible for making decisions and why they were selected to be the decision maker will have a better understanding of how and why things happen the way they do than someone who does not understand the decision making process in the organization. When both politics and understanding are high, performance is likely to increase because the individual will see political actions as an opportunity. This is consistent with what you might expect among individuals with well-honed political skills. But when understanding is low, individuals are more likely to see politics as a threat, which would hurt job performance. Second, when the politic is seen as a threat and consistently respond to with defensiveness, negative outcomes are almost sure to surface eventually. When people perceive politics as a threat rather than as an opportunity, then they often respond with defensive behavior, reactive and protective behaviors to avoid action, blame, or change, and defensive behaviors are often associated with negative feelings toward the job and work environment. Next, please. All right, next, the extensive research on the relationship between the perceptions of organizational politics and individual outcomes. There are five of it. The first, there is very strong evidence indicating that perceptions of organizational politics are negatively related to job satisfaction. The second, the perceptions of politics lead to anxiety or stress. When it gets too much to handle, employees got quit. The third, it is a demotivating force and performance may suffer as a result. The fourth, the effect of politics is moderated by the knowledge the individual has of the decision-making system and his or her political skills, such as high political skills individuals often have improved performance. Low political skills individuals often respond with defensive behaviors, reactive and protective behavior to avoid action, change, or blame. The fifth, reactions to organizational politics is also moderated by culture. In countries that are more unstable politically, workers will tolerate higher levels of politicking than more politically stable countries. Next. Okay. Next we gonna talk about impressions management. Next. In this part, we will talk about defensive behaviors on how we're gonna avoid some things that in terms of political behaviors in the organization. There are three of it, and we're going to first we talk about avoiding actions. The first is over-conforming. This defined as strictly interpreting your responsibility by saying things like you are screwing state or this is the way we've always done it. The second is playing ignorance. When we have the political behaviors in organizations, we gotta play ignorance such as avoiding an unwanted task by falsely pleading ignorance or inability. The third is backpassing by transferring responsibility for the executions of a task or decisions to someone else. The fourth is stretching, prolonging a task so that one appears to be occupied. For example, turning a 2-week task into a 4-month job. The fifth is styling, appearing to be more or less sportive publicly while doing little or nothing privately. Next. Next is buffing. This is a nice way to reward recovering your reel. It describes the practice of rigorously documenting actively to project an image of competence and trophies. And the second for avoiding blame is playing safe, evading situations that may reflect unfavorably. It includes taking on only projects with a high probability of success, where risky decisions approved by superior, qualifying expressions of judgment, and taking neutral positions in conflict. The fourth way to avoiding blame is scapegoating, placing the blame for a negative outcome on external factors that are not entirely blameworthy. Next, in avoiding blame is justifying, developing explanation that lessen one's responsibility for a negative outcome and or apologies to demonstrate remorse. Next, for avoiding blame is misrepresenting, manipulations of information by distortions, endorsement, deception, selective presentation, or obfuscation. Next. Now we're going to talk about defense behavior to avoiding change. To avoiding change, the thing that we have to do is prevention, trying to prevent a threatening change from occurring. And the second is self-protection. To avoiding change, we have to acting in way to protect one's self-interest during change by guarding information or other resources. Next. For next part, we will talk about impression management technique. The first for impression management techniques is conformity. Agreeing with someone else's opinion to gain his or her approval is a form of integration. For example, a manager tells his boss, "You are absolutely right on your organization plan for the Western Regional Office. I couldn't agree with you more." The next four impression management techniques is favors. Doing something nice for someone to gain that person's approval is a form of integration. For example, a salesperson say to a prospective client, "I've got 2 tickets to the theater tonight. Can I that I can use? Take them. Consider it a thank you for taking the time to work with me." The next is excuse. Explanations of a predicament creating even aim at minimizing the apparent severity of the predicament is a defensive impressions management technique. For example of excuse. A sales manager says to her boss, "We failed to get the ad in the paper on time, but no one responds to those ads anyway." That's the explanation example of excuse. The next is apologies. Admitting responsibility for an undesirable event and simultaneously seeking to get a pardon for the action is a defensive impression management technique. For example, an employee says to his boss, "I'm sorry I made a mistake on the report. Please forgive me." That is example for the apologies in impression management technique. Next. Next for impression management techniques is self-promotion. The definition is highlighting one's best qualities, downplaying one's deficits, and calling attention to one's achievement is a self-focused impression management technique. For example, a salesperson tells his boss, "Might work unsuccessfully for 3 years to try to get that account. I sealed it up in 6 weeks. I'm the best closer this company's had." And next is enhancement. Claiming that something you did is more valuable than most other members of the organization would think is a self-focused impression management technique. For example, a journalist tells his editor, "My work on this celebrity divorce story was a really major boost to our sales, even though the story only made it to page 3 in the entertainment section." The next is flattering, complimenting others about their virtues in an effort to make oneself appear perceptive is likable is an assertive impression management technique. For example, a new sales trainee says to her peer, "You handled that client complaint so tactfully. I could never have handled that as well as you did." For next is exemplification. Doing more than you need to in an effort to show how dedicated and hardworking you are is an assertive impression management technique. For example, an employee sends emails from his work computer when he works late so that his supervisor will know how long he's been working. That is an example of impression management technique. Next. Now we move on to the ethics of behaving politically. Now we will discuss about behaving politically ethics in the organization. Political ethics, also known as political morality or public ethics, is the practice of making moral judgment about political actions and political agents. It covers two areas. The first is the ethics of process or the ethics of office, which deal with public officials and their methods. Theories of political behavior as an aspect of political science attempt to quantify and explain the influence that define a person's political views, ideology, and levels of political participation. Political behavior is the subset of human behavior that involves politics and power. Next. Next is summary and implication for manager. We have talked about powers and behaviors in organizations. Now we're going to discuss about the summary and implications, also the recommendations for the managers. If you want to get things done in a group or any organization, it helps to have power. Here are several suggestions for how to deal with power in your own work life. The first, as a manager who wants to maximize your power, you will want to increase other dependence on you. You can, for instance, increase your power in relation to your boss by developing knowledge or skill she needs and for which she perceives no ready substitute. But you will not be alone in attempting to build your power basis. Others, particularly employees and peers, will be seeking to increase your dependence on them. While you are trying to minimize it and increase their dependence on you, the result is a continual battle. The second is few employees will reach being powerless in their job and organization. Try to avoid putting others in a position where they feel they have no power. The third is people respond differently to the various power bases. Expert and reverence power are derived from an individual's personal qualities. In contrast, questions, reward, and legitimate power are essentially organizational derived. Competence especially appears to over wide field and is used as a power-based result in high performance by group members. The message for managers seems to be develop and use your expert power base. The fourth is an effective manager accept the political nature of organization by assessing behavior in a political framework. You can better predict the actions of others and use that information to formulate political strategies that will gain advantages for you and your work duties. The fifth, some people are significantly more politically astute than others, meaning that they are aware of the underlying politics and can manage impressions. Those who are good at playing politics can be expected to get higher performance evaluations and hence larger salary increase and more promotions than the politically naive or inept. The politically astute are also likely to exhibit higher job satisfactions and be better able to neutralize job stress. The sixth is employees who have a poor political skills or are unwilling to play the politic games, generally related perceived organizational politics, to lower job satisfactions and self-reported performance, increased anxiety, and higher turnover. Next. Okay, that's all for our presentations. Now I will give it back to Adjie as the.
Okay, so thank you for Arya and for Kevin for the presentation. And now we move to the evaluation. So this is some of questions that we give to you guys that watch these videos. So the first question is, why personal power better than formal powers? And the second question is, why dependent important for powers? And the third question is, what are the cause and the consequence of political behavior? You can answer this question in the comment section below. Next. So this is for the Q&A. If you have any question from today's presentation, you can write your question in the comment section and we will answer it in the comment section too. I think that's all from us. Thank you for watching these videos and see you later. Thank you.